It started with the click of the front door, not the slam of someone angry or the creak of someone cautious, just the smooth, well-oiled click that told me Jessica was home again. Late. I didn't even need to glance at the clock above the kitchen sink. I already knew it was past 10. My name is Matthew Hughes. I'm 38 years old, and I live in Fernbrook, Florida, just a few blocks from the shore. I've been a civil engineer for nearly 15 years, most of them spent building custom homes for wealthy retirees who want to feel like they've made it. Our house, a pale yellow Victorian with wraparound porches and hand-cut corbels, is one of the best I've ever worked on. It's my pride, or at least it used to be. Jessica and I met through work. She's an interior designer, and not just good at it, either. She has this ability to make a place feel like it was born with its character. Soft light, warm textures, symmetry that doesn't scream at you. She's got a way of pulling things together that makes people think, I want to live here. When we first started dating, I thought we were perfect. She brought beauty, I brought structure. We talked about starting our own firm together, building homes from the ground up, inside and out. That was a long time ago now. Back then, Jessica talked about having kids. 2, maybe 3. She even had baby names picked out. But life got busy. Projects stacked up. We moved into this house instead. And somehow, those conversations faded like pencil lines under fresh paint. When I brought it up a couple years ago, she smiled politely and said, "We're not really in that phase anymore, are we?" Like we had silently agreed that family meant clients and contracts, not late-night feedings or scraped knees. I kept telling myself she was just busy. The firm was growing. She had a ton of referrals, and those design expos in New York or Atlanta seemed legitimate enough. But a few months back, I started noticing things. She used to bring back samples, stories, little inside jokes about hotels with terrible wallpaper. But now she'd barely mention them. She came back tired, distracted. The kind of tired you don't shake off with sleep. When I offered to pick her up at the airport one night, she looked almost startled. "No, don't worry about it," she said. "Peter's already swinging by." Peter, our old friend from the yacht club. Not that I had a problem with him. He was a good guy, ran the marina, but something about the way she brushed me off felt off. Like I wasn't part of the story anymore. Like she'd moved ahead and left me on the blueprint stage. I didn't confront her. I'm not built like that. I build homes, not drama. So I watched. I took mental notes. I learned to study the silence between words, to read the empty spaces in our schedule, the missed dinners, the stiff smiles, the way she avoided looking at me when I asked how her week went. I watched my wife drift, and I realized that the foundation I thought we poured together had started to crack. Quietly, almost invisibly, but undeniably. The photo came on a Tuesday. Midday. I was at the drafting table, tweaking a roof pitch for a coastal bungalow when my phone buzzed. "Peter, hate to be the guy who sends this, but thought you should know." Attached was a photo, grainy, taken from across the room, the kind you snap when you're pretending to text. But there she was, Jessica, in a slate blue dress I didn't recognize, sitting across from a man I definitely didn't know. They were tucked into a booth at Levelier, one of those high-end downtown places that requires reservations and makes their own truffle oil. She was laughing, leaning in. His hand wasn't on hers, but it was close. Too close. That look on her face, I hadn't seen it in years. I zoomed in and stared at the guy. He had one of those architectural beards, neat but deliberate. The kind of face that screams curated lifestyle and handcrafted whiskey. Something about him felt familiar. I sent the photo to our project manager, Callie. She's plugged into every design gossip circle in the state. Me, ever heard of this guy? 10 minutes later, she sent back a name. Callie, Oliver Grant. Architect. Super flashy. Works the historic meets modern angle. Total peacock. Rumor is he slept with half his client list. Women mostly. Married once. The name unlocked a dozen little connections. I'd heard of him, everyone had. He was the guy who flipped Queen Anne-style homes into glass-walled showpieces with solar panels and wine cellars. He showed up in magazines with his sleeves rolled to the elbow and boots that probably cost more than my watch. A showman. And now, apparently, my wife's design expo buddy. That night, I didn't say a word to Jessica. I couldn't. I needed more than a hunch and a bad photo. So I started paying attention, not just to her, but to him. I searched him online. His portfolio was full of testimonials from empowered women, divorcees, empty nesters, women who had reinvented themselves through design. A couple names jumped out at me, wives of clients I'd worked with. One even posted a teary thank you on his Instagram. Oliver helped me find myself again. His whole brand was transformation. And Jessica? She'd been muttering about reinvention for months. I started digging. Quietly. Social media. Tagged photos. Design events he'd spoken at. Jessica's name came up more than once. I found a group photo from a panel in Tampa, Oliver standing with his arm draped across her shoulder like they'd known each other for years. I was watching something unfold. A second life being built right in front of me, not with nails and beams, but with secrets. And I was done pretending not to see it. Thanksgiving at the Callahan's Lake house used to be something I looked forward to. Jessica's parents were old money, polite to a fault, and the house itself was stunning, 2 stories of glass and cedar perched above Lake Magnolia. The kind of place where wine had tasting notes and no one ever raised their voice. I usually stayed close to the fire pit, bourbon in hand, quietly enduring whatever passive-aggressive commentary Jessica's family lobbed my way. But this year felt different. I wasn't just walking into awkward glances and forced smiles. I was walking into a crime scene. Only I was the only one who knew a crime had been committed. Jessica had been glowing all afternoon. Not in a festive, family holiday sort of way, but in that freshly validated way I'd seen in that photo with Oliver. She floated from person to person, laughing in this breathy way that didn't sound like her. When she introduced me, she didn't say, "This is Matt," like she used to. Now it was, "You remember my husband, right?" Like I was some guy who used to fix her sink. Around the dinner table, the conversation turned to business, hers, not mine. Jessica had recently launched her own boutique consultancy, and apparently the family had gotten the press release. "Oh, Jessica, that branding is genius," said her cousin Lauren, who once tried to make her dog an Instagram influencer. Jessica smiled modestly. "It's all about working with people who understand the evolution of a space." That was Oliver's exact tagline. I had seen it on his website the night before. They kept asking questions. No one asked me about work. No one ever did. I excused myself after dessert and slipped into the kitchen. The voices were muffled behind me until I heard her. Jessica. She was on the other side of the butler's pantry, speaking in that low, conspiratorial tone she used when she wanted to feel important. "Honestly, it's like I live with a reliable handyman," she said. My stomach dropped. Her sister, Ava, made a sound, part gasp, part giggle. "That bad?" Jessica sighed. "He's sweet, but everything is numbers and permits. Oliver and we talk about possibility. He gets it." I stood frozen, my fingers wrapped around an untouched glass of cider. I don't know what hit harder, her words, or how casually she said them. Like I was just some stable fixture in the background. A dependable wrench in her toolbox. A few minutes later, I returned to the table, smiling, nodding, letting everyone believe the world was still turning like normal. That night, as we packed leftovers into reusable containers she insisted on bringing, I glanced at her across the granite counter. Same woman, same laugh. But all I could hear was her voice in that pantry. A reliable handyman. I didn't say a word. Not then. But I made a quiet promise to myself on the drive home, watching her scroll through her phone like I wasn't even in the car. Next time we're all gathered, I won't be the one holding the silence. I'll be the one holding the truth. I didn't plan the reveal. It wasn't some cinematic moment with dramatic music and a gasp from the crowd. It started with a text. One photo. Sent to a few close friends who had been asking why Jessica and I never seemed to be together anymore. "Me. Thought you should see this. Jessica and Oliver at Levelier last week." The responses came fast. One word at a time. "Jake. Shit. Callie. Is that who I think it is? Derek. Man. I'm so sorry." I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't have to. Gossip in our town spread like a grease fire on a stovetop, fast, messy, and nearly impossible to contain. By the next afternoon, I had 3 voicemails from people I hadn't heard from in months. A contractor I hadn't worked with since 2018 texted me, "Hey, man. Heard about Jessica. You good?" Peter called again. "I'm hearing her name all over the club, man. Even the board's talking about it. You want me to shut it down?" "No," I said. "Let it ride." Jessica still hadn't noticed. At home, she floated through the days like nothing had changed, pouring coffee, taking calls in the sunroom, bringing home scented candles that all smelled vaguely like pretension. But the energy had shifted. And not just for me. That Friday night, we were supposed to attend a fundraiser hosted by the Historical Society. Jessica had donated a staging consult. I was listed as a sponsor. When we arrived, I noticed the difference immediately. The usual smiles were tight. Conversations were clipped. People greeted her with the kind of politeness reserved for scandals not yet confirmed. Jessica blinked her way through it all, clearly rattled. On the drive home, she finally asked, "Did something happen?" I didn't answer. That silence stretched across the entire weekend. We coexisted like strangers renting the same house. She made a pumpkin soup I didn't touch. I spent 4 hours reorganizing the tool shed just to stay outside. On Sunday night, as we sat across from each other at the kitchen island, she finally broke. "Okay," she said, folding her hands. "What's going on?" I looked up. "Calm. Steady. You tell me." Her lips tightened. "Matthew, don't play games." I stood, walked to the drawer where I kept spare batteries, and pulled out the envelope. Inside were the printouts, Photos, social media posts, even a timeline of events. When I slid it across the counter to her, she didn't open it. She stared at it like it might bite. "You went through my stuff?" she said, her voice breaking. "No," I said. "I watched. I listened. You taught me that." She opened the envelope. Slowly, as she flipped through the pages, her breathing changed. Shallow. Sharp. Then she looked up at me. No tears, no denial. Just fear. I wasn't yelling. I didn't throw a glass or demand explanations. I just looked her in the eye and said, "We don't build things on lies. And this." I nodded toward the envelope. "This is rot in the foundation." She whispered, "What do you want?" I leaned closer, steady as the beams I lay. Truth. Not stories. Not performances. Just truth. Where this whole thing comes down. And just like that, she realized. The man she thought she could manage, the one who always bent to keep the peace, was gone. And in his place stood someone who knew exactly how to dismantle a structure without making a single sound. After the envelope hit the counter and the silence that followed, Jessica started unraveling. Quietly, at first, nervous habits, awkward pauses, retreating to the guest room under the excuse of needing space. But she didn't understand. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't angry in the way she was used to, raised voices and slammed doors. I was building something. Methodically, piece by piece. The night after our confrontation, I messaged James Ellison. We'd crossed paths a few times at the marina, both of us regulars at the Tuesday night poker games. I remembered when his wife suddenly found herself through design and left him for an architect. At the time, I hadn't asked questions. Now I knew exactly what to ask. He responded 10 minutes later. "James, Oliver Grant." "Me? Yeah. James, meet me tomorrow. I've got a story you need to hear." We met at a little dockside cafe the next morning. James looked older than I remembered, not in years, but in wear. Like a man who'd been sandblasted by his own life. "He took everything," James said, stirring his coffee like it had wronged him. "Turned my wife into someone I didn't recognize. Convinced her she was too good for our life. She walked out on me in the antique store 6 weeks after their first consultation." I nodded. "You're not the only one." By the end of the week, I'd connected with 2 more men. Ben Carter, younger than me, worked in marketing. His fiancée had been planning their wedding when she hired Oliver to help with a new loft downtown. By the time the invitations went out, she was living in one of Oliver's restored brownstones instead. Then there was Dr. Adrian Miles, a clinical psychologist. Sharp, composed, the kind of guy you think wouldn't be vulnerable to this kind of betrayal. His wife ran a holistic wellness clinic where Oliver had been hired to reimagine the space. That reimagining turned into late-night strategy meetings. Then weekends away. Adrian kept detailed notes. Of course he did. He showed me a map, pins on the women's businesses, their homes, lines connecting back to Oliver. It wasn't obsession, it was evidence. "It's not just affairs," Adrian said. "It's manipulation. He finds women on the edge, frustrated, ignored, and gives them this illusion of transformation. But it's just smoke. Design as seduction." We shared our stories over beers and folded takeout cartons, each of us realizing this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was bigger than that. Oliver had a pattern, a blueprint for breaking apart lives under the guise of enlightenment and style. I looked around at these men, each different, but all carrying the same wound. And I realized I wasn't alone. I thought I was the only one living in a house with invisible cracks. But Oliver hadn't just taken pieces of our wives. He tried to reshape our identities, convince them we were obsolete. Not anymore. We decided to build something of our own, not out of spite, but solidarity. A coalition. Not to destroy him recklessly, but to expose him carefully, structurally. After all, if you want to collapse a house of mirrors, you start with the first beam. The plan was simple: act interested. Not angry, not suspicious. Just 2 professionals eager to collaborate. James and I reached out to Oliver under the pretense of needing a lead architect for a historic restoration project, a century-old firehouse downtown that needed vision. Something that matched his brand of transformation. Oliver responded within hours. Oliver would love to connect. Let's talk creative synergy. Of course he would. We met him on a Wednesday afternoon at his so-called studio, a renovated warehouse near the Arts District. The building screamed curated charm, exposed brick, steel beams, wide-planked floors, and a scent that tried hard to be rustic but smelled more like moneyed vanity. There were no drafting tables. Just sleek furniture, mood boards, and oversized canvases of past projects that all had the same sanitized elegance. Oliver welcomed us like an old friend. White button-up, sleeves rolled, that curated scruff on his jaw. He looked like someone who spent more time in coffee shops than on job sites. "Matthew, James, appreciate you coming by. I followed your work on the coast," he said, flashing a confident smile as we sat down. "Appreciate that," I said. "Thought this firehouse project might be the right kind of narrative. History meets future. Seemed like your thing. Narrative. I like that, he said, leaning back. Design is always a story. And if you tell the right story, people feel like they're living a new version of themselves. He was already selling it. Not the project, the identity. That was his gift. Not architecture, but performance. James asked a few technical questions, budget expectations, timeline logistics, and Oliver's answers were fluid but vague. Lots of phrases like vision-centric flexibility and elevated user experience. Nothing concrete. Nothing measurable. I glanced around. There were no permits on the walls. No blueprints. Not a single sign of active work. You working on anything right now? I asked. He nodded toward a closed door. Couple high-end projects in the pipeline. NDA clients. You know how that is. Except I did. And the real professionals didn't hide behind NDAs unless something was off. No active renderings. No structural specs. Just charm and flash. When the meeting wrapped, he shook our hands firmly. Let's stay in touch. This has potential. As we walked out, James let out a breath. Nothing under the surface. Exactly, I said. No real business. Just bait. Oliver had built a brand, not a practice. He was empty drywall behind designer wallpaper, appealing from a distance, but one knock away from collapse. We didn't confront him that day. We didn't need to. We'd seen the cracks. And soon, so would everyone else. It didn't happen overnight. We weren't trying to blow things up. We wanted something more permanent. A quiet, thorough demolition, the kind you plan like an engineer, not a jilted husband. The four of us, James, Ben, Adrian, and me, met once a week in the back room of James's boat repair shop. Fold-out table, cheap coffee, and a whiteboard full of timelines and names. It looked like a startup meeting, except the product was justice. James moved first. Through his network in real estate and historical preservation, he started making calls. Nothing aggressive. Just soft nudges. Oliver Grant? Not sure he's reliable. Had issues with permits. Budget creep. You might want to vet that a little harder. By the second week, Oliver had been quietly removed from 3 shortlists. Ben used his media contacts, mostly through a podcast host who covered design scandals and ethical breaches in architecture. Within 10 days, a new episode aired titled The Man Behind the Facades, Charm or Con? It didn't name Oliver directly, but the details weren't hard to decode for anyone in the industry. Dr. Adrian, the most methodical of us, contacted several of Oliver's past clients under the premise of writing a paper on manipulative dynamics in professional client relationships. He recorded every interview, cataloged patterns of behavior, and submitted a complaint to the state licensing board citing unethical conduct, citing multiple cases where clients reported undue emotional influence and blurred boundaries. Me? I handled the local web. I sent out anonymous tip-offs to the Neighborhood Business Association, Design Guild, and City Planning Committee. I emailed screenshots of suspicious permit filings. I made sure his name came up in the same sentence as oversight, conflict of interest, and contract irregularity. At the same time, I made a few quiet calls to clients he was trying to poach, women who hadn't yet signed but were in the excited phase. I sent them articles. Gave them context. One of them canceled her consult before the meeting ever happened. Meanwhile, Jessica was starting to flail. Her inbox wasn't as full. Her calendar didn't look as colorful on the wall. She spent longer and longer scrolling through her phone with this pinched look on her face. When I walked in on her mid-conversation one evening and she snapped the laptop shut, I knew the campaign had reached her, too. I don't know what's going on, she said, as if I were a coworker. It's like someone's trying to ruin him. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't ruining him. We were restoring structural integrity. Oliver had built a career on illusions, seducing women into believing he was a doorway to a better version of themselves. He told them their lives were outdated floor plans. We were showing them the truth. His foundation was hollow. And his career? Built on cracks. By the end of the month, his bookings were down. His website listed temporary project delays. His name stopped appearing in press releases. And just like that, the charm started to fade. And the man behind the glass facade began to sweat. The official papers went out on a Thursday morning. I had them printed on heavyweight linen stock, not out of spite, but because I wanted everything to feel clean. Final. Jessica received the divorce filing via courier at 9:14 a.m. I know because she texted me at 9:16. Jessica, what is this, Matthew? I didn't reply. There was nothing left to explain. I had evidence of infidelity. Financial records showing she'd used company funds to cover personal travel. Emails that crossed the line between business and pleasure. It wasn't just betrayal. It was misappropriation. The house? In my name. The firm? My structure. Her name was on some branding, but the paperwork told the truth. My lawyer smiled when he saw the file. You'll come out of this just fine. Jessica, on the other hand, wouldn't. By the second week of December, 3 of her biggest clients pulled out. Word had gotten around, not through me directly, but through the network. It wasn't just the affair. It was the association with Oliver. People whispered about reputational damage, questioned her professionalism. Her name stopped appearing on the local design forums. Her email signature lost its sparkle. She tried to do damage control, a carefully worded post about personal transitions and creative realignments, but the comments were dry, and the likes never hit triple digits. Meanwhile, I was thriving in the silence. I went back to building real things. I picked up a civic restoration project, a community library with a tight budget and an even tighter deadline. The kind of job that reminded me why I started this career in the first place. But I wasn't just burying myself in work. I was doing something bigger. With help from Dr. Adrian, I launched a local workshop series, Strong Foundations, Protecting Yourself in Personal and Business Partnerships. It wasn't flashy. We hosted the first one in a rec center gym, folding chairs and dry erase boards. But 25 people showed up. Women, men, small business owners, folks who'd been manipulated, scammed, sidelined. We shared stories. We shared tools. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something with purpose. Jessica's family, once blind to it all, started distancing themselves. Her mother, who used to call me our rock, now avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Her father emailed me with a curt line, "Regret how things turned out. Hope you find peace." I didn't need peace from them. I had found something better, clarity. I wasn't a handyman. I wasn't just the guy who remembered to tighten the bolts and balance the budget. I was a builder. Of homes. Of lives. Of boundaries. And as I stood in the middle of my workshop that Friday evening, watching people nod along, take notes, ask questions, I knew something deep and unshakable. Jessica broke the house. But I rebuilt the foundation. And this time, it would hold. 6 months later, the community center smelled like fresh lumber and brewed coffee. The light came through the high windows in long golden strips, falling across polished floors and walls still warm from recent paint. I stood near the entrance, greeting attendees with a clipboard in one hand and a quiet kind of pride swelling in my chest. This place, the Fernbrook Community Hub, was my latest project, and the most personal one yet. Built from the bones of a shuttered grocery store, it was now a space for small business owners, nonprofit groups, and people trying to start over. I had designed it with wide-open rooms, flexible spaces, and one hard rule. Everything had to be functional and honest. No showy design tricks. No architectural illusions. Just good, solid work. The first workshop of the day had already started, a small business budgeting class led by a local accountant. Down the hall, a women's support group met weekly to talk about navigating life after betrayal. Adrian and Ben had both spoken here in recent weeks. James was now running a part-time mentorship program for young tradesmen. We called ourselves the network now. Not official, but real. And as for Oliver, he was gone. Word had it he moved out of state. Quietly. His license flagged for review after several client complaints were reopened. The glossy website? Taken down. His Instagram hadn't been active in months. Last we heard, he was consulting out west, but his name no longer carried weight. The shine had worn off. Jessica had moved too, in a different way. She took a job in another town, something modest, more clerical. Her consultancy had dried up fast once clients stopped returning calls. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment over a nail salon 2 towns over. We hadn't spoken in weeks. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. And me? I was seeing someone. Her name was Claire. She was a veterinarian in a nearby town, kind eyes, smart humor, hands that didn't flinch at messes. We'd met at a pet adoption fundraiser I helped sponsor for the center. She'd laughed at my awkward small talk and then stayed for coffee. No games. No design schemes. Just warmth. It was slow, easy. The way good things should be built. That afternoon, as I watched one of the workshops let out, I spotted a teenage boy holding a flyer and smiling as he told his dad, "I want to do something like this." His dad clapped him on the shoulder. They walked out together, hopeful. I looked around and felt it in my bones, the steady hum of real work being done. Not the glamorous kind. Not the kind you post about, but the kind that lasts. I stepped out onto the front walk, the Florida breeze brushing against my collar, and took one last look at the center sign, built with purpose. Made to last. That's the thing about structures. Flash fades, paint peels. But the good ones? The honest ones? They stand.